Hello and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Lost now in the eternal war of Star Trek versus Star Wars is that for a good decade or so, there was a third contender in the battle of star-named franchises that, in my opinion, was winning during that period. Stargate. Stargate began life as a frankly mediocre Roland Emmerich film in 1994. It was really the beginning of his series of trash spectacle films that he made afterwards. Independence Day, Godzilla, The Day After Tomorrow, 2012, etc. However, Stargate was the one that had the most potential for expansion. The film is about a strange alien circle being located in Egypt, reinforcing the fringe and frankly stupid beliefs of James Spader, aka Dr. Daniel Jackson, that the pyramids were actually landing platforms for alien ships because a lot of very stupid people think that ancient civilizations couldn't figure out how to make shapes. Correction, a lot of very stupid, racist people thought that ancient civilizations couldn't figure out how to make shapes. Since, as Quentin Reviews once pointed out, or paraphrasing him here, these conspiracy theories almost never seem to suggest that, say, the Roman Colosseum was influenced by aliens or something. Anyway, Stargate. The premise basically goes that thousands of years ago, aliens came to Earth, co-opted, or were the inspiration for, various religious figures, and used that power to enslave humanity. These aliens, known as the Goa'uld, had spaceships, but they also had that circle, a Stargate, which allowed for near-instantaneous travel between any two planets in the universe that had another Stargate on it. Now, the Goa'uld did not build the Stargates themselves. Those were left behind by an even older civilization known as the Ancients, who also happened to be the guys behind Atlantis. Oh, and the reason we haven't found Atlantis yet is because it actually was a city-sized spaceship that left Earth a long time ago. Obvious in hindsight. Anyway, point is, humanity rebelled against the Goa'uld and they left, the Stargate getting buried so they couldn't locate Earth again, because I guess keeping navigation logs and coordinates for spaceships was really hard back then. It was ancient times. Sure, they had spaceships, but they hadn't invented paper yet, and they had to write it all down on stone tablets, and Gary was really drunk that day. The movie is not really about the Stargate itself. Once they figure out how to activate it, a team travels to another planet, meets the descendants of humans taken from Earth, and with the help of Kurt Russell as Colonel Jack O'Neill, they blow up the Goa'uld known as Ra and liberate the locals. Daniel Jackson stayed behind because he hooked up with a woman, and that was the end of Stargate. Roland Emmerich and writer of the film Dean Devlin wanted to make sequels, and there are some comics and novels that do follow up on that, but 3 years later, MGM decided that they wanted to create a TV series, released on the cable channel Showtime. Writers Brad Wright and Jonathan Glassner were both working on the Outer Limits reboot at the time and made separate pitches for the show, and MGM decided to make the two partner up to develop the show, now called Stargate SG-1. It is indeed a follow-up to the movie, the pilot taking place about a year later. The assumption in the movie was that the Stargate only connected to one other planet, so it was basically shelved in the Cheyenne Mountain military complex and forgotten, until Goa'uld suddenly started pouring out of it and attacking. After bringing in Colonel O'Neill again, now spelled with 2 L's and played by Richard Dean Anderson of MacGyver fame, they make contact with the now Michael Shanks-played Dr. Jackson and try to figure out what the deal is. Jackson's wife is kidnapped by the Goa'uld and they discover a massive set of coordinates to try with the Stargate. As such, they begin regular missions with SG teams sent out to explore the universe, find Jackson's wife, and try to make friends and acquire technology to defend the Earth from potential Goa'uld attacks. And thus the Stargate franchise was truly born, with 10 seasons of SG-1, 2 more direct-to-video movies, 2 spin-off shows, Atlantis and Universe, an animated series of questionable canonicity I haven't seen, and a prequel series that I haven't seen either. If you slept on Stargate all the years it was on, either on Showtime or the Sci-Fi Channel after it rescued it, you owe it to yourself to check it out. The series is fun. Ongoing plot lines certainly happened, and there was arc development and significance, but there were plenty of standalone episodes that had occasional follow-up, lots of great character dynamics, and just a general sense of optimism about the mission and saving humanity week after week. Occasionally they delved into dark subject matter, especially Stargate Universe because it so desperately wanted to be Battlestar Galactica, but most of the time it was a pretty breezy watch. It's not perfect, of course. The very first Planet of the Week episode, Emancipation, Emancipation is god-awful to the point of it being frequently taken out of syndication. Speaking of Planet of the Week, because of budget reasons, many of the planets they visit, especially early on, look very similar to Canada for some reason. There's an episode in Season 2 that... Well, let me put it this way. A child is brainwashed by the villain, and they decide that the only way to free him from the brainwashing is to electrocute him. Yeah, Stargate is overall great, but occasionally there are moments in episodes that have really skeevy and wince-inducing implications that the creators didn't really think about. Even great shows have their low points and bad stuff in them. They should be called out in the hopes of doing better while praising the stuff that deserves it. Stargate was wonderful, and it's a damn shame that the franchise has just kind of been shoved by the wayside of history, with MGM not really interested in doing more with it beyond the prequel series I mentioned earlier. And it really kind of sucks that there's been no effort at other studios to revive it. Sure, some of the actors certainly have tried, and there have been audio dramas done by Big Finish, similar to how Doctor Who and Blake 7 have expanded their stuff, but no big revival, sadly. And that's especially disappointing because Stargate Universe, as it was actually starting to get its groove and become a decent show, ended with a cliffhanger that had to be resolved in comics a few years ago. But yes, comics of course are why we're here. There have been several Stargate comics, the aforementioned Universe one to resolve its cliffhanger, the ones following on from the film made before the TV shows, and of course a crap ton of Stargate SG-1 comics, with most of the Stargate comics being done under Avatar Press. You might remember them as the ones behind the god-awful Nightmare on Elm Street comics I looked at years ago. So let's dig into Stargate SG-1 POW number 1 to 3 and see if they follow that pattern of suckiness established from that.
Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Linkara's gonna teach you all a lesson you won't learn. What's with these awkward subjects? What's all this art so rubbish? To anyone who's had a bad comic published, it could be your turn. Linkara, he is a man who punch sporadically a grouch. Linkara, he has his own spaceship, but he's always on his couch. Linkara. A universe in flux, Linkara. This comic sucks, Linkara.
There's, of course, more exposition about the show I can give, but that intro was already going a bit long, so we're gonna have to cover some of those details here as we talk about this, frankly, kind of boring cover as we see SG-1 surrounded by Goa'uld Serpent Guards. Two of the likenesses, for Teal'c and Daniel Jackson here, are fine, but O'Neill looks kinda average, and I have no idea what's going on with Sam Carter here.
No surprise!
But yeah, the other two members of our SG team. Captain Samantha Carter is a theoretical astrophysicist and frequently the resident smart person on the show when it comes to tech and science, with Daniel Jackson serving as the smart person for history and language. And then there's Teal'c, resident badass and muscle. He's an alien, a member of a race known as the Jaffa. The Jaffa were enslaved by the Goa'uld and used as hosts and soldiers. See, the Goa'uld are actually a parasitic worm that infects a host and takes control over their body, extending the host's life, but, you know, taking control of them once they reach maturity. They're kept under control by the Goa'uld telling them that they're all-powerful gods, but Teal'c was convinced of the truth long ago and decided to defect to the good guys when he saw that they actually had a tech level high enough to fight back. Mind you, he also quickly learned that our tech level wasn't much better than digital watches and cable TV, but hey, we do have Star Wars, and Teal'c likes Star Wars.
We brought pizza in a movie.
Star Wars.
He's seen it, what, 8 times?
9.
9 times.
And yeah, the Serpent Guards, part of the intimidation factor of the Goa'uld. They're basically big, ridiculous armor that worked better in the original film when it was a digital effect and not an oversized helmet.
There. Sure glad I don't look stupid in this.
Anyway, we open with a Serpent Guard shooting his staff weapon out into the woods. Hey, he may work for an evil tyrant, but someone's gotta do the gardening around here. A caption informs us that this takes place in the latter half of Season 1, and this is not the only Serpent Guard attacking, as we soon see. An SG team is under attack and they're fleeing back to the Stargate. I think the way the art is done, with the faces heavily in shadow, we're supposed to believe this is SG-1, particularly with a bald black guy and a guy with glasses getting punched. But as one of the team members leaps through the Stargate, we cut back to Stargate Command, aka the SGC, and see SG-1 being briefed by General Hammond on their next mission. Data from the map leads us to believe that PC-3551 is currently an uninhabited world. Oh yeah, and since they didn't really have names for all these planets they were going to, unless the locals told them a different name, they were assigned a combination of letters and numbers to identify them. Which reminds me, don't be a dick and open a wormhole to P3W451. That's just a headache and a half right there. Anyway, there seems to be an abandoned Goa'uld base there. Our mission is to try to determine what made the Goa'uld abandon this site and to recover any technology or tactics that might have helped remove them from the site. You know, things like low-hanging ceilings that their helmets kept bumping into. And thus the reveal of SG-1 and the snark from O'Neill. Wouldn't it make more sense for us to just ask the landlord if they were evicted or only denied their security deposit? Tried already, Colonel. No response. And reviews of them online made them sound like a pretty scummy rental company as it is. Before they can leave, however, the gate is activated. As a security measure, the SGC has a titanium iris over the gate that can open and close if someone coming through doesn't have the right security signal. In this case, the signal is coming from SG-2, so they open the iris and the soldier from the beginning comes tumbling through. Serpent Guards follow behind him, but fortunately our heroes quickly fight back. They close the iris again as the gate turns off, but the leader of the Serpent Guards has some kind of device that allows him to reactivate the wormhole and, I guess, open the iris? Weird how they never employ similar tech in the future. Ferretti, the soldier who came through, informs O'Neill that this particular Goa'uld, wearing a more golden version of the Serpent Guard, is actually Skara. Skara was a local boy in the original Stargate film that O'Neill befriended, serving as a kind of surrogate son figure since O'Neill's actual son accidentally shot himself with his father's gun. I did say this was a fun series, right? Anyway, Skara got taken by the Goa'uld and now has one controlling him, so trying to rescue him was a recurring plot thread for a few seasons of the show. As such, O'Neill leaps through the gate after him, the wormhole closing right afterwards. Defensive teams come in to guard the gate should it open again, but Dr. Jackson is just concerned about rescuing O'Neill. Personally, I'd be worried about the fact that this is clearly a version of him that's time-traveled because his hairstyle is wrong for Season 1. But yeah, General Hammond points out that the base was just compromised and they need to secure everything before they worry about rescue missions. And indeed, they should be worrying about themselves first, because it seems Skara left behind a present, a device that's attached to the gate that's giving off a lot of heat. Great, the Goa'uld are trying to overclock its CPU! A soldier tries to crowbar it off the gate, but it blasts him or something. Stargate's Gordon Freeman didn't have a very long career. Meanwhile, O'Neill lands on the other side of the gate and is immediately captured by Skara, ending the first issue. Issue 2's cover is another wraparound, and while the likenesses of the characters are fine, they especially did a good job replicating Teal'c's Season 1 grumpy face, the SG-1 team patch looks like a very rough tracing job. Also, these splotches of blue on O'Neill and Carter I'm sure are meant to just be like lighting effects from the Stargate, but they end up looking like paint bleed through. We start this one off with Teal'c apparently forcing his way into the control room, demanding he go back to retrieve O'Neill, being restrained by some soldiers. Hammond reiterates that they can't risk going after him without compromising the SGC. Lieutenant Colonel Samuels is here for some reason, despite being transferred to the Pentagon. He was a minor antagonist in the first season, and, like most antagonists in the show, was a short-sighted dick. He orders the soldiers to restrain Teal'c, and this demonstrates his idiocy since he's already being restrained. Sam gets Teal'c to stand down, touching him on the face for some reason. It's a weirdly intimate act. Also, Dr. Jackson's hair has returned to normal between issues. Very well, General Hammond, but I will go after O'Neill alone if I must. Let us face it, as the resident badass on the team, I would probably be more effective than an entire squadron of soldiers. You guys have P90s, but I have got these guns. Anyway, Sam explains that the device is channeling energy directly into the Stargate and it's heating up a mineral that's in it, naquita. Once it reaches a critical temperature, it'll blow up the gate, and Naquadah is not a small explosion either. It'll probably take out most of Colorado in the process. While Carter works on a brilliant plan, O'Neill is being interrogated by the Goa'uld. Look, I promise not to tell you what Freud would say about those big snakeheads you wear, but you gotta let me down first. It's not anything sexual. He'd actually say it represents humanity's natural fear of being eaten by a giant snake in a Sci-Fi Channel original movie. Freud was very ahead of his time in some ways. Naturally, this just leads to him getting beaten up some more and then thrown into a cell with some other prisoners. Hey, buddy, I have a plan to get us out of here. All I need is a rubber band, a paperclip, and Oh, this isn't a MacGyver reference. He's actually thinking of that brief Western Richard Dean Anderson starred in, Legend. Man, there's a show that nobody ever talks about. He spots Skara nearby to interrupt his joke, and that brings us back over to the SGC. Lowering the temperature in the gate room has slowed the energy buildup, but it's not stopping it. Since there doesn't seem to be anything mechanical keeping it attached to the gate, they suspect something like an electromagnet is keeping it in place, and a focused EMP might get it off. Well, she says EMP pulse, but that's a tautology that I wouldn't expect from her, so I'm just going to assume the cold's getting to her. Of course, the downside of EMP technology is that it could knock out electronics for the entire complex. That means shutting down the SGC and NORAD. Not really. There's a reason why it's a focused pulse. Sure, there'll be some splashback, but not anything that major, especially if the gate room is properly insulated. Hammond agrees to the plan, much to Samuel's objection. The rest of the scene is baffling. Why? Because it's an 8-page recap of the movie and first episode. This comic came out in 2004. SG-1 was in the middle of its 7th season. Who is going to be picking up a Stargate SG-1 comic except for fans of the TV show who already knew all this? And even if somehow they hope to attract newcomers with the comic, why do this recap in the 2nd issue instead of the 1st? It's really just padding, because there's very little to this story. The plot is paper thin, and the decision to have this be the first proper SG-1 comic released just comes across as desperate for anything to put out there. The lead up to this scene is that, according to Ferretti, the population of the world they had been on was similar to those of Abydos, the enslaved people in the original movie, thus they want a briefing on those events. These people should know all this stuff too! Why the hell are they involved with the Stargate program at all if they don't know this stuff? Staring at the event horizon for the first time was like staring into the face of God. Unfortunately, it was God from Marvel, so it was really annoying and said that we should feel bad about molecules dying. We later reasoned that the wormhole worked by deconstructing molecules and transporting them across the galaxy to a new destination. And by later, I mean they knew that already. It was on the computer screens in the movie. Also, spelling error there. Desit Nation indeed.
Indeed.
There we found a primitive population of roughly 5,000 miners harvesting a mineral called Naquadah. And one of them was incredibly creepy looking if this art is anything to go by. They were bound in slavery to Ra, the Egyptian god of the sun. We discovered that Ra was actually an ancient alien being who had come to Earth thousands of years before and had possessed a peasant boy to ensure his own immortality. Unfortunately for him, the nuke to the face kind of canceled out the immortality. After he finishes explaining how they defeated Ra, Teal'c gives the plot details of the first episode. The Goa'uld Apophis searching for new hosts for his bride and other servants, Teal'c deciding to defect after O'Neill pleaded with him, and them escaping back to Earth. The EMP plan is attempted, and it succeeds. The thing falls off the gate. The device appears to have reset itself. Crap, now it's asking for a login password, and I don't remember what I set it as. Ferretti informs General Hammond in this less than stellar artwork that Skara used the Goa'uld palm device on one of his men, and it allowed him to rip information and knowledge from them. And if he uses it on O'Neill, the Goa'uld will learn everything about the SGC and Earth's defenses. Issue 2 ends with the rest of SG-1 deciding to storm into Hammond's office to demand a rescue mission for O'Neill, but it seems he's way ahead of them. SG-1, let's get the other teams prepped for deployment. We're gonna get our man back. Now, if only this gun wasn't glued to my hand! Issue 3's wraparound cover is fine, just a generic shot of SG-1 in the desert on the front, along with the bizarre looming giant head of General Hammond floating in the background like he was friggin' Zardoz! Colonel, the gun is good. The penis is evil. Good luck, SG-1. This is a weird new version of Zordon. You know, when they were naming one of the spaceships in later seasons the George S. Hammond, I didn't realize the design would match him. I am Hammond, the great and powerful. Pay no attention to the Gould behind the curtain. Great, he's trying to get SG-1 to show me what you got. Man, the later Dune books go in some weird directions. I don't know why they ever had a problem fighting Anubis. General Hammond could just eat his ship. Hate to say it, but I think we're gonna lose this staring contest. No, Teal'c. I'll show you how to do a proper interrogation. God, did O'Neill activate the cheat code for Big Head mode? Check out our new movie, The Amazing Colossal Hammond. I didn't realize I wanted Godzilla vs. Hammond until this moment. Honey, I blew up the general. This is why we couldn't have him around in the last few seasons. No one would worship the Ori if they saw this coming up on the horizon. You know, there's a thing in Stargate called Ascension where you, like, evolve into pure energy or something, but maybe you actually just become a giant head. I know we wanted to honor Don S. Davis after he passed away in 2008, but maybe the statue of him was a bit much. In Transformers, it's Unicron's head floating around Cybertron. In Stargate, it's General Hammond's. After the Great Division in the Monument mythos, a few canyon crowns ended up in some unexpected places. Awkwardly, the rest of his body did not grow, so he's just basically a human bobblehead. And finally, geez, no wonder General Hammond was worried about launching a rescue mission. How's he gonna fit that through the Stargate? Anyway, we open with Skara talking to a legion of Serpent Guards. Servants of Apophis, hear me. The time has come to destroy the enemies of your god. First, though, I have some birthdays to announce. I should note that he has a Goa'uld name separate from Skara. It's just for the purposes of this review, it's easier to refer to him as that. Clarel, I think it was? Back to Stargate Command, and I have to comment on this finally. The art is kind of weird and not great. Aside from a little thing here when General Hammond looks much shorter than he should be, the actual style looks unfinished, as if someone just colored the pencil sketches without doing any real inking. And yeah, there's no inker credited, so I think that's exactly what happened. So we've got several pages of rough pencil cross-hatching combined with actual lighting effects on the color, alongside attempts to be photorealistic, possibly traced from the show itself, honestly. And it all looks kind of bad and incomplete. It's certainly not the worst art we've seen on the show, but it's not very attractive either, especially on this last panel on the page where Hammond is explaining about all the forces they've gathered for this rescue mission, and there are pencil cross-hatching lines everywhere. All these detail lines are appropriate though, since of course the Nightmare on Elm Street comics we looked at from Avatar also had excessive amounts of detail lines. Just saying, perhaps Hammond here should not look like a big mesh net is being placed over him. Status report, Captain Carter. Sir, I've just about completed the A-bomb. What's sad is that I could totally believe that Carter could whip up an atomic bomb like that. She blew up a solar system once. On purpose! A-bomb? Like Hiroshima? Daniel, you've seen them with nukes before. Hell, there was a nuke present in the original movie! Which you talked about last issue! But no, she explains that this is a nickname for an Apophis bomb, which apparently utilizes the same technique that the Goa'uld try to use on their Stargate. It attaches itself to a Stargate and then gets really hot. And even then, why would you want to blow up their gate? No, it's a Hellfire missile enriched with Naquadah, with a payload in excess of 50 megatons, and hopefully strong enough to take down a Goa'uld pyramid ship. Not sure how that works under the same principle as the heat-generating device other than it makes things explode, but whatever. How do you propose that we retrieve O'Neill before the A-bomb explodes? Teal'c, did Colonel O'Neill ever tell you about this country's war for independence from the British? You are going to throw their beverages overboard. We were outmanned, outgunned, and ill-equipped. We only had two things going in our favor. We had the spirit to take the fight to the enemy, and we didn't fight fair. I mean, we also had more knowledge of the terrain, additional help from the French, the fact that they were shipping soldiers overseas in order to get to us. Basically, we had a lot of things going on to help with that. Also, take the fight to the enemy? In Stargate, did we invade England? We get a page to remind us that O'Neill's being tortured for information. He pleads with Skara to fight the Goa'uld's influence without success. After Hammond gives a speech to the troops, Samuels comes in to demand they halt this mission under orders from Senator Kinsey, one of the higher-ups who does oversight of the Stargate program. He's also a major asshole, but a topic for another day. In any case, Hammond reminds him that he's operating under the President's authorization, which kind of overrides a senator. Not that he should be able to authorize missions or not, not, since a senator isn't in the chain of command, but whatever. Hammond tells him to cram it and get prepared, because Samuels is going on the mission too. At the planet, some of Skara's soldiers see the Stargate activating and ready their weapons, including this guy who decided to put his Pope hat on today. Unlike Star Trek, Stargate remembers that grenades exist, so on occasions like this, the team sends through a few smoke bombs and flashbangs to distract them so they can charge through and secure the gate. The attack goes through and, we see this weird shot of Skara's soldier getting shot. But then there's, like, the big hat guy and the serpent armor coming up? Are these supposed to be 3 different guys standing really close to each other? Or is this, like, an Animorphs effect? Apparently Samuels forgot to grab any actual gear besides a gun, which gets blasted out of his hand. Fortunately, he's saved by whoever the hell this poorly drawn guy with a big forehead is. He tells SG-1 they have 20 minutes to retrieve Colonel O'Neill. Skara is informed of the attack and he unleashes death gliders at them. Basically Goa'uld fighter craft. While they take on the forces at the gate, who of course came equipped with rocket launchers for just this situation, SG-1 reaches the pyramid where O'Neill is being held and quickly frees him. Unfortunately, the forces at the gate are overwhelmed and they need to retreat back to Earth, launching the A-bomb at the nearby pyramid. Our heroes return and head through the gate as the bomb hits. And so our comic ends with the pyramid, mostly undamaged due to an energy shield around it, and Skara opens up a lighter given to him by O'Neill in the movie, his eyes glowing as he simply says, "O'Neill." Yeah, that's it. No epilogue, no follow-through to indicate if that was Skara or Chlorel talking. It's just him saying O'Neill's name, and that's the end. Yeah, I hate to say it, but this comic sucks. Even putting aside that the artwork is really not that great, lacking proper details, and, as I said, lacking any kind of inking, and instead just making the art look unfinished, the writing is pretty mediocre. Minor continuity issues are one thing, but the story is just O'Neill is captured, tortured for a bit, and then they rescue him. While a Stargate episode's plot could be pretty simple, they get captured and have to be rescued or try to escape all the time, there was usually something more to it than this. The comic is filled to the brim with padding, exposition about stuff that the readers should already know, scenes that go nowhere or fill time, like General Hammond making speeches, or Samuels just being a dick, and there's no actual character development. The characters are basically at their surface level with no range or anything more interesting to say about them, or just something of substance. O'Neill's snark is good, but everyone else lacks anything that made these characters so beloved. If this had been an episode of the show, it would have been a pretty mediocre and forgettable one. Why is this their first outing for Stargate? Who pitched this story? Okay, we'll have 3 issues that are just an action scene, a flashback, and then a rescue mission. Sure, the story doesn't have to be overly complex to be good, but this feels like nothing. The action scenes are admittedly pretty good, but they don't make up for anything else. Well, even if this book was crap, at least I got to revisit some really good sci-fi and Stargate itself. The same cannot be said for next time, with a Patreon-sponsored review of Man of Steel. No, not any comic with that name. You know which one.
Sitting on my couch reviewing comics, the worst books that you will ever see. It's sad that comic books are for geeks, but they're not. They're for everybody. If you doubt that I am a man, I am a man.
I've never blown up a star before.
Well, they say the first one's always the hardest.
Hello my friends, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell for notifications on new video releases. If you'd like to support future videos, you can check out my Patreon or purchase a t-shirt via Teespring or Shark Robot. Thanks for watching!